This is the SQL Server module regarding the SQL Server security, and in this video we are going to discuss about the authentication and authorization in the SQL Server. We will see how to implement the proper authentication and authorization in SQL Server. So first, let to know what is the authentication and what is the authorization. SQL Server security starts from the authentication, and authentication is the process to verify the identity of a user. For example, this is a login. This user need to connect with the server, and this server must verify this identity of this user. After verification, this login is authenticated. Now this login is authenticated means this login can connect with the server. This login can enter into the server. Now after entering into the server, what this login can do? So this is known as the authorization. Authorization is start after authentication. Authorization is the process to assign the authenticated resources to this login. So now there are two kinds of authentication in SQL Server. This is the Windows authentication, and the other one is the mixed mode authentication. In mixed mode authentication, we can use both SQL Server authentication and Windows authentication. In Windows authentication, the SQL Server will use the Windows accounts, Windows local accounts or Windows domain accounts to authenticate the user into the SQL Server. SQL Server will not maintain the accounts but instead of maintaining itself, SQL Server will use the Windows accounts for the authentication. So the responsibility for the maintaining of the account is eliminated by the SQL Server administrator. It's the responsibility of now the Windows administrator or Windows domain administrator. So SQL Server will use that logins and will create the tokens for that logins to use to authenticate into its environment. Now we can see this authentication mode into the SQL Server. This is the SQL Server Management Studio. If I want to connect in this SQL Server Management Studio, it's asking for the authentication mode. So this authentication mode, while installing the SQL Server, we have to choose there, and we can change even after installation. If we want to change the mode, we can use after installation as well. So now the Windows, when I'm going to select the Windows authentication, the SQL Server will use that login which I used to log in into this Windows account. So I'm login with this account on this laptop in this window. So SQL Server will use this account to login in this server. So after this login, if I need to check the authentication mode and to change the authentication mode, I have to go to this instance level properties, and here in the security menu I can find the authentication mode here. So right now this is the mixed mode authentication, which can use both SQL Server and as well as Windows users for authentication. I can change here Windows authentication if this login have the rights to change this property. Let's see, this login has the right to change. No, this login don't have the rights to change these properties. So we cannot change, but we can change with these logins. And after changing the login, we have to restart the service so that the changes should have to effect. So that we can change the login modes from here. Why we need these two kinds of authentication? Microsoft recommends the Windows authentication. This is more secure, but in some scenarios we have to use the mixed mode authentication if the domain is not trusted, or this server, SQL Server, is not in the same domain. It's outside of the domain. Then in that case we have to use the SQL Server authentication. So these are the modes for the authentication in the SQL Server.